Well, welcome everyone. Great to see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces to Veteran ETA Roundtable. Tonight, we're very fortunate to have John Mahony with us, speaking about his experience acquiring business. And just a few housekeeping things. I'm going to put out another survey just to kind of get a take on what everyone's looking for. I'm scheduling out additional speakers and appreciate your insight on that. And just before we get to John's presentation, I just want to introduce John and provide a little bit of his background. So John Mahony is the founder of Change of Command, which is a holding company that partners with retiring business owners based in Tennessee to continue to grow their companies and strengthen their communities for the long term. John is currently the CEO of Bailey Heating and Air in Greenville, Tennessee, where he's served the East Tennessee community since 1991. Prior to acquiring Bailey Heating and Air, John served as a Marine Corps infantry officer for 5 years, starting out in 2007. I then attended Wharton for his MBA, worked as a McKinsey consultant, helped launch an African Leadership University School business, and then he also worked as the CEO of With Honor, which is working to create a more effective government promoting principal military veteran leadership and elected service. John is, he's a big deal in the veteran community. You've seen him in some podcasts. He's just one of the most friendly, humble, approachable people that I've come across. So I'm so thrilled to have him here. He also has brought with him one of the folks that he's been working with. So I'll just give Larry Feltz is here as well. So glad to see Larry here. And Larry, if you'd like to introduce yourself real quick before we kick this off, that'd be great.
All right, Charlie, thank you. I'm blessed to have met John Mahony. He has such an infectious personality. Anybody who's met him understands that. Started out in mentorship and he asked me to join his team, and I couldn't say no. So I served as the CFO of Change Command. He's got big ideas. We made the first acquisition. We've had it for a year. We have a great opportunity on the horizon. I spent my time in the United States Air Force. I have a great love for veterans and the people who made the sacrifices of their time and their knowledge and their energy and their freedom from day-to-day activities to serve their country and their fellow man. So I'm here to support John. We're looking forward to doing a lot of transactions. We're set to do that. I hope all of the people that are on here are going down that path, and the things that we might add might ring a bell sometime, alert you to even just give us a call if you need help, if you get stuck in the middle of one of these transactions. John?
Yeah, thanks, Larry. And thanks, Charlie, for that great introduction. I mean, it's a good thing the veteran community knows how to, keep people from getting a big head. So I'm sure I'll get chirped by the end of this conversation and beyond. But so thankful to have met Charlie and everything he's building with this group, and of course partnering with Larry. I mean, part of the reason I went down this path of acquisitions was to work with people I loved and do work that I think is meaningful and important. And Larry and I's partnership is a great example of that. And for tonight, I thought maybe we'd have kind of a structured conversation to start, but kind of zip through it, and then we could do a lot of questions and answers, because this is a very complicated topic of the process. And with that said, Larry and I are both easy to find. Probably the best way to get in touch with us is LinkedIn, but feel free to reach out whenever. So grateful to people who were helpful to me in the process, and Larry and I feel very strongly about paying it forward. And this is a challenging process that can use a lot of help from people who have been through it, especially recently. So always reach out. But with that said, why don't I share my screen here and get us going? As both Charlie and Larry mentioned, Change of Command is the holding company in our first partnership with a retiring owner, which was the 100% buyout. It was Bailey, which was Bailey Heating and Air, and we've since added electrical and about doubled the business over the past year. And it's been an amazing year. I feel so extraordinarily lucky to have this team, our new team members, and especially the relationship with the retiring owner and his wife Carla. And we had a longer LOI period, which is a topic of today. Charlie asked me to speak about the period after the LOI has been signed through closing. So we closed in February of 2023. That was literally us after signing, 300 pages of paperwork. All of us had hand cramps from signing our names and addresses so many times. I was at their best friend's office conference room since we were still keeping it confidential at the time. And then that 48 hours before meeting the team was an interesting waiting period. But before we kind of launch into, the LOI to the close period, I just want to say that, I think everyone on this call, veterans, uniquely qualified to be successful. I think that everyone on this call, by showing this interest and going this path, can crush it because, using the veteran ETA roundtable schedule as an example, with these 10 sessions, the pre-search, making the decision if you're going to search, that might last a day, that might last a while. The actual search process could take 2 years. What we're going to talk about between the letter of intent and closing the deal, that could take as little as 2 to 3 months. So, the actual operation of the business after this 2-year period could be decades, could be for the rest of your life. And, this timeline partnered with, I was circling the people who have spoken here that Charlie's brought together. I mean, the idea that there are all these people who want to support veterans who are going this path throughout this timeline is just amazing. And, part of that is because this 24-month period that you might dedicate to searching, it might be a lot quicker than that. Maybe it's longer than that. But a lot of this is going to be new to veterans. So the letter of intent process, the diligence, the capital raising, but so much of these transferable skills will come out, know yourself and seek self-improvement. That's straight out of the Marine Corps. So there are going to be gaps in our skill sets. We can figure it out. And building a connection with the seller, which is such a huge part of the process, especially when it's very personal in the lower middle market. I mean, we've all done a ton of key leader engagements throughout our time, especially on deployments. And then, digesting a lot of information, making decisions in chaotic situations. None of that's new to us. Working a process, building a process, none of that's new to us. So even though the tactics of this might be the first time you're seeing them from the LOI to close process, that's okay, because you actually have the fundamental underlying skills to succeed. And then when you actually get to the ownership part, that's something that veterans thrive in, with operational leadership, mission planning, giving intent to a team, and building a culture. So I have huge confidence in everybody on this call to get through this LOI to close period, even though it's a fresh look at a different industry than most of us have been in from our military career. So I thought we could start by giving my viewpoint as a buyer. And, I just kind of flushed out some bullet points here. We'll also talk about from the seller's perspective, which Larry can add a lot of color to. But the cautious optimism and healthy skepticism part, it's tough not to celebrate when you get a signed LOI with a seller, but there's a non-zero chance that it will not work out. So it's definitely an interesting period of time. People, someone actually, a fellow veteran, said this to me about the LOI to close period, where he compared it to combat. People have talked about how there's these long periods of boredom and then these, massive spikes in adrenaline and challenges. And, it is going to get pretty repetitive. You're going to fill out your personal financial statement multiple times, and you're going to be sick of talking about, how many boxes you've checked on some of these forms. But then there are these massive periods of decision making, since there is a timeline and there's a lot of uncertainty. So, even though this process is non-binding, it's still a massive deal, both for you and the seller. So even though it's non-binding, the seller is going to, think that this is going to happen. And, you want to create the environment for yourself so that you can focus on the business and, not some fundamental questions like, am I prepared to do a personal guarantee? So, I would encourage you to, at the very beginning of this process, get on the same page with your family. And also understand that, like I said, this is just going to be a paperwork slog. So, the beauty of an MBA case study is that all the information is prepackaged for you. and you can make decisions off that. But part of this diligence process is trying to bring all that together. It's also, like I mentioned, about how many times you got to fill out, your amount of credit card debt. You're going to have to get comfortable with disclosing a lot of personal information if you're working with the SBA. And you're also going to have to ask investors who you may or may not have a prior relationship with for a good amount of information, and you're going to have to press them on getting it to you in a timely manner. So there's a lot of administrative work. And one thing that I wanted to highlight there, having those conversations with investors about the administrative nature is important because of technicalities that I was certainly not aware of before going through the process and working with my lender, who I was so happy highlighted in advance. Because, for example, investors would need to have the money in an account for at least 2 months and bank statements to show that. This way, the bank can definitively say that this isn't a loan, and they know where the money came from. So there's a lot of administrative processes that you might not have thought of in the first place if you are going the SBA route. So as you go on the SBA route, you're going to want to push, and everyone else has their own priorities. So no one's going to want to move as fast as you do. And it'd be very tough to say, hey, we're going to close in 60 days. So I would be kind of wary of committing to a very quick timeline. Life insurance can be a big drag on the timeline. It was for me, and it was something I had to go through for the first time. And I would encourage people to speak with their lender right away if they're thinking about getting an SBA loan, about what that life insurance requirement might be. And there's other third-party involvement that can be very delayed, especially when it comes to real estate and title insurance. And as you're going through this process, the owner has their team of professional service providers, like a lawyer and an accountant, and they may not be familiar with the M&A process, and they may not be good actors in the process. So, not only do they maybe have a competency gap, but they might also, come across as friendly, but their first duty is to protect their client, which is a seller. So, that can certainly be a point of frustration when, you might have retained an exceptional M&A lawyer and their lawyer might be non-responsive or, making unnecessary edits or requiring additional paperwork. So there's definitely, a lot of gamesmanship involved with the players on the board. And as all these professional service providers are working, you're going to want, of course, the paperwork to be perfect, and it's never going to be like that. But it's ultimately your responsibility to have quality control over every single piece of paperwork that you sign and the seller signs, because at the end of the day, you're just going to be held accountable for that. No matter how many pages of legal documents you got to read through, it's your responsibility to know it. The other part of that is, no one's going to be as incentivized as you to close the deal. You're going to want to close the deal. So you need to create some stop gaps to, have some logic and some clear decision points on your side for, reasons not to close. I personally thrive on enthusiasm and, think about ways I can make things happen. But it's important to have kind of no-go criteria. And for an SBA loan or for a self-funded search, usually the part of diligence that will give you that no-go criteria is the bank's underwriting, whether they're going to finance you with debt or not. And with the lender and these professional service providers, people in the military will say, your most powerful radio weapon's actually your radio, talking about bringing resources to bear as opposed to being focused on the tactics. So you're not going to be the expert. So it's really important for you to build a team that can help you with this process and do it within a reasonable budget for what you can support. Because, you're not a large private equity firm with a budget for massive due diligence to cover every detail. So you need to flesh out what's important to you. And one of those details may be the working capital peg, which is kind of notoriously very difficult to not only figure out, but also, explain and come to an agreement with the seller. So that could probably be a whole nother session that Charlie hosts on that specific topic. Um, but with all these processes and diligence, all the advisors are going to want you to succeed, and they're going to give you their recommendation. But ultimately, just like in the military, you're the ground commander, so they're going to figure out what they're tasked with by you. They're going to execute on that, but they're not going to have the whole picture, and they're not going to see if you're a fit for the business acquisition, or probably what you see on the operational diligence side of things, because that's usually exclusively on the seller to understand, is this the right business for me to run? What is going on the ground with this business? And use that along with the information that experts provide you, just like an overwatch position is kind of looking out to your front, to make a decision ultimately. So this is a very stressful process, but you can use it to strengthen your relationship with the seller. Kind of like, we're going through this together. Same thing with the investors, where this is an amazing time to have investors who, kind of the classic term of value add investors, to help you with the diligence, to help you think through the strategy. And of course, leveraging the whole community. And, the tough part about this is it's non-binding. Many sellers change their mind. Many sellers have circumstances that don't allow this to happen. So, the best laid plans, and even if things are going to plan, it still might not work out. And that's tough. With these plans, sometimes you're just not going to get what you want. Speaking with customers or speaking with, the team members, it's very much decided on a case by case basis during the diligence process. So that's usually a point of contention or point of nerves for the buyer if the seller or the broker is very uncomfortable with that. So I can't stress enough about over communication, especially with your lender, and how you're going to get asked all the time by the buyer, or excuse me, by the seller, hey, you're going to be able to close this deal. You're going to be able to close this deal. So, even though there might be bad news or might be, changes to the plan, you got to communicate that as soon as possible, because it's respectful to the seller, of course, but also, if this is not the right deal for you and you're a self-funded searcher, you want to move on quickly. So it's great to identify these and just have those difficult conversations, because it's definitely not going to get any easier. And before handing it over to Larry, I just want to mention, search generally is a pretty lonely path. And, this period of time where there's a lot of nerves involved, where you're so close to the finish line, but also it could just be a total non-starter. I would definitely encourage people to think about this from a positive spin of this great training for running a business, whether it's this business or the next business. You're learning about all the financials, you're learning about all the operations, you're really digging into how the business operates, and you're also formulating a plan. So it's amazing training. And, part of it along the way is just thinking about it with small victories, because it can be very difficult if you're going along and at the end of every day, you're like, 0 on the scoreboard, I didn't buy a business. The next day, 0 on the scoreboard, I didn't buy a business. So if you're thinking about it in small wins and working your plan, then, it will be a much better experience, especially if you're trying to get in shape and build good habits. This is something I wish I had done a lot better, because you're all of a sudden not going to start working out on day 1 of operating the business. So if you have these kind of foundational habits built, you're going to be much healthier and much happier going through this stressful period. So I know that was a lot. So why don't I turn it over to Larry to talk about maybe the seller's point of view.
Yeah, so this is an interesting process, and it's an interesting time because we have so many people that have, we're looking at so many businesses, the people, it's been their lifetime. It's how they identify themselves. It's how they're recognized in the community. It's what you ask them who they are, and they say, well, I own the HVAC company, or I own the roofing company, or I own the whatever it is. They have great pride in it. It's been their whole livelihood. They get up in the morning and that's all they think about until they go to sleep at night. And now they're faced with a time that they've put off for about as long as they can, and they're going to have to transition that business into somebody else's hands. So you've got two really divergent attitudes. You've got a potential buyer that's all excited, that's on fire, that just can't wait to get their hands on the wheel and start making decisions and running this thing. And you've got a seller that's just reluctantly handing over the keys, and he may not even give you the full set. You've got a seller has never done this before. He's never sold his business before. And you as buyers, as searchers, oftentimes have never bought a business before. So, I mean, this is a tough combination to get to the finish line to start with. There's so much to do. And what I think my advice would be is don't try to do this by yourself, and find the best people that you can possibly find to make the journey with you. Get as much of this information ahead of time, and not, okay, now I've got a business that I can buy. Can I buy it? Can I finance it? How do I do that? These educational meetings that you're having here are invaluable. And you need to go back and revisit them time and again. They're recorded. But go find out what you can buy, what your capacity is. Go to the banker. Don't necessarily default to the SBA and think they're the only ones that could loan you the money. There are plenty of bankers that are looking to make deals. You got to remember, banks make money by making loans. They don't make money by saying no to people. So they're predisposed to really want to get involved with you on a transaction, and they can be your long-term friend. So get out there and try to make relationships before you get to the point where you have to answer that question. When somebody asks you if you can do the deal, sure, I can do the deal. I know I can do the deal. I'm ready to do the deal. I'm qualified to do the deal. Let's do the deal. Let's don't have to backtrack and go find out. The LOI, although it's non-binding, is pretty critical. You don't want to become the guy that makes a lot of commitments to buy business and then backs out or can't qualify at the end of the day. That'll get around the broker community and everything else, and pretty soon you won't get a chance. There are people that are representing the seller that are also very much amateurish. And when John says they don't have the best interest, the seller's best interest in hand, they don't necessarily have you the best interest in hand. They're transactional people. They get paid by getting the transaction to the finish line. There's no penalty if it crashes and burns 6 months later and you lose everything you put into it. That guy's check is cashed, and he's going on to make the next deal. So know who you're dealing with, and make sure that you arm yourself. People get greedy on both sides of this transaction. And we were, one that I ran into that really sort of qualified me to know something about the HVAC business was a situation where the attorney for the seller decided they didn't need a broker. This was such a sweet deal, and it was going to go so fast, and it was going to be an auction process, and they were going to be able to sell it to the highest bidder. And he was going to be the broker in effect. He knew nothing about it. And so when we started into the process of doing the transaction, he was nothing but a roadblock, and he was just, he was obstructing at every turn, and it was very frustrating. So, you don't always believe, that, oh, this guy knows what he's doing, and he's asking me for this, or I need to do that, and because he says so. And the other thing I would suggest to you, you better have a lot of guts when you get into this thing, because the guy that I was working with, I wouldn't play hearts with him. He was so cold-blooded. I can't tell you how many times he got up and just left the room, and the seller and the reps and the lawyers and everybody are sitting there, and they're saying, "You think he'll be back?" And I said, "No, he's not coming back today." When he leaves, it's not, okay, I'm going to go out here and cool off. He's gone. Until you change the terms or you change the deal, he won't be back. So stand your hand, understand what your plan is, have a plan. They're going to try to ease you into a little bit more here, a little bit more there. And when it adds all up, it may take you out of your qualification. So anyway, it's a great process. It's a fun process. You'll get good at it. And, you do it once or twice, but it's an expensive beta. There's a lot at risk. And I think the big deal is you're really confident that you can take this business, that you can run it, you know what you're doing, you got great ideas, you see great potential for it, and it'll be good in your hands. And so you have to be patient, but you have to be, tough, and you have to be willing to walk away. Even if you think it's the end of the world, you have to be willing to walk away, because you can't you just can't crash and burn. I told John we were lucky in some respects. I think we've hit at least an extra base hit on the first one. It may be a lot of extra bases. Thank God we didn't strike out, but you will. There are a lot of people that do, and some people get discouraged. Don't get discouraged. It's better to lose the deal than to make a bad deal and have to live with it. So I always keep that in mind, that there are other deals. Yes, it took you a long time to get here. It took you a long time to get to the table, but there are other deals. And sometimes you just can't overcome that seller's reluctance to give up the business. They're not cooperating with you. They're not being straight with you. They've got somebody that's representing them, that's trying to push the business off, make a quick sale, intimidate you. If you don't do this, we're gone. We've got other buyers waiting out in the lobby. Good, call them in. I'm gone. I'll find somebody. I'll find another one. It'll be a good deal.
Well said, Larry. Well said. Yeah, I mean, on that note, managing relationships, it's really, the seller, broker, the capital providers, the professional services. And, I was very lucky to find amazing professional services firms to work with, many of which Charlie has had as guests. As far as the seller goes, one thing that he said that always stood out to me as we were standing in line at the DMV transferring titles of the vehicles was, can you imagine how miserable this would be if we didn't like each other? It is a tough process, and many people, cross the line and buy businesses with sellers that they don't get along with. But because it is a hard process, and because, we're choosing the entrepreneurial path, Larry and I have used, fit with the retiring owner as a key criteria, which makes all this much easier. So I'm gonna go through these pretty quickly, but as far as diligence goes, Charlie's already had a lot of detailed sessions on this. One that I would point out, based on my own experience, I would really dive into the licensing aspect if you're getting into a trades business or any of these kind of showstoppers that the business cannot continue, especially with SBA rules in play. So great read there is from one of Professor Wasserstein's Yale papers on diligence. The capital raise process basically broken up into lending and then investors. So the process, as Larry mentioned, can start with just a pre-qual where you get to know your lender or get to know many banks and tell them your story. And many of the SBA lenders are going to be very excited that you're a veteran because they've seen the track record of success and they understand your skills. Once you sign a post LOI, they might give you what could be called a term sheet or a proposal or an LOI. But basically they're saying, hey, this is kind of the terms we're thinking about. Let's keep learning more. And then we'll actually give you a commitment letter through their credit review committee. And then they'll say, we commit to these terms unless something happens that we think is going to rock the deal so much that it won't work. And they're going to ask you for all these paperwork and everything else that the seller might not have ever even had before, and will have to generate from scratch during the great paper chase as their credit review committee is making sure that they can follow through on that commitment letter. And then eventually you'll get the deal funded. Kind of similarly, you get to know investors by sending them an investor packet. Usually it's more than just kind of the SIM, the confidential information memorandum that you would get from the broker. Most investors will want to see kind of your viewpoint on this as opposed to just the prepackaged material. The bank isn't going to really focus on the investor returns as much as the overall cash flow, but investors are definitely going to want to see some type of information on what their return will be. And you can describe that return and the terms surrounding it in a term sheet. I put 4 pages there because it's pretty brief, kind of, what we intend this deal to look like. And then you'll follow up with an operating agreement, which is much, much longer. So basically a term sheet on steroids that would be the kind of binding document. And of course, during all this, you're going to be prepping for day one of meeting the team and also running the business. So many of these kind of forcing functions, like an SBA requirement of a business plan, you can actually use that to help strengthen your thinking as opposed to just kind of a check in the box. And there's no harm in over planning. So we all know, the value is kind of where your thinking's at. So to kind of close here, during this LOI to close process, you're going to have a ton of new information coming to you. You're going to have a lot of choices to make based on new information. And in the HBR Guide to Buying a Small Business, I thought it was an interesting framework to use. I wish I had relied on it more during my process, but with new information coming to you, basically your decision points can be, okay, is this information going to make me walk away? And as Larry said, no deal is way better than a bad deal. But is this going to make me walk away? Is it not enough to walk away, but I need different contract terms? Or is it enough to actually change the price that we agreed to in the LOI? Or is it kind of a minimal fact that I need to keep in mind for operating the business, but we can still close as the LOI indicated? So it's a absolute adventure to get through this process, especially for the first time. I just had a friend whose LOI actually didn't work out and he walked away, but he said, that was an amazing learning experience and I already can't wait for the next one because I have such a better idea of how to go through the next process. So, like I said at the onset of this call, I think everyone on this call can be massively successful. I think that especially because there's such a tight-knit community to mentor people through the process or be formally involved as professional service providers. So I'm hugely excited for everyone who's investigating this or already going through the process, and looking forward to answering any questions you have now or in the future. So with that, Charlie, thank you for the opportunity to share Larry and I's thoughts.
Thank you so much, John and Larry. That was absolutely terrific, really insightful, and just really good information. I'm gonna have to watch that again. And again, probably down the road. I'm sure a lot of people will as well. Yeah, I think, we have about 10 minutes here. So I'd love to open it up to anyone that has any questions for you guys. I know I have questions, but I'd love someone in the group to ask a question if they have any.
Charlie, can I say just one quick thing before this too?
Of course, Larry.
That I work around with a lot of entrepreneurs. I work in the National Entrepreneur Center. I see the things that are going on. One of the really astute people in the world, the guy that founded the Entrepreneur Center, a very successful serial entrepreneur, will make the statement that the mistakes that you make in the early stages of buying a business or owning a business are immeasurable until 10, 15, sometimes 20 years down the road. You don't realize how much they can cost you. So I just recommend that everybody find good professional partners to make the journey with you. Get second opinions. Make sure that what you're doing makes sense. Don't get in a rush and cut a deal with an investor that will give him more ownership than you somewhere down the road. Those are the types of things that are the structure of the deal, the operating agreements, the the transaction agreements itself, the deals you make, the employment agreements, the non-compete agreement, all of that stuff that you really just trust to somebody else. If you do that at the low bid person, to the cheapest person that can do the work, one of your buddies, you're putting a lot into that. And one day you'll look back, and if you've used the wrong people, if you've made those mistakes, you'll look back and you just say, oh my goodness gracious, look how much little they did, how little they really provided in the scheme of things, and look how much they're walking away with compared to me, who's gone out there every day and beat his head against the wall, and I've got this, for it. So use good professionals.
Thanks, Larry. That's great advice. Really appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions for John or Larry?
I got a question. So John, Larry, thanks for the talk today. I think I've heard you guys on a podcast, so I kind of know your story already. But I kind of hit at the right point. I'm an LOI now with the business. Thanks. It's just one of 20 steps. I'm in step one, and it's the issue coming into now. Even just today is the buyer. I think is just like is realizing like he's selling and I'm the one who's rushing. Like I have a timeline. I have 70 days to close still. And he's like, hey, what's the rush? And I'm like, we're going on vacation for 3 weeks next week. What do you want me to do? So my priority isn't his priority. Right. So how do I also get this older gentleman, 73, and I'm a, Gen X guy. So it's hard to kind of also just like slow your roll a bit for me.
Yeah, no, I can definitely empathize. The competing timelines of all interested parties are very difficult to deal with. And there's kind of a running joke that at least once during diligence, the seller will go to Florida. That's like at least once they'll take a vacation. And on a positive note, if he's taking a vacation and isn't in a rush to sell, it might be a well-structured business that doesn't need him to be there day to day.
Right.
So that could be a positive note. And of course everyone wants to step into the shoes of the ownership as soon as possible, but I think that as far as the spectrum of problems go, it's better for him to not be as rushing than him to be really pressuring you on timeline, because that's very difficult. But I totally empathize with you because, for someone in their 70s, it's more likely that they are actually going to retire. What I kind of see often is people who are in their 40s or 50s who think that they want to retire and think they want to sell their business. Then they realize, oh, the proceeds of this are actually going to be a lot less after taxes. I got like 50 years to live. I don't know if this is going to last me. Oh, wow. What am I going to do at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday? Maybe I don't want to sell. This process is pretty hard. Maybe I just want to keep running the business, or like, hey, what if I hire someone? So, and I'll let Larry weigh in as well, but I understand your frustration, and let's definitely talk offline about like some ways to mitigate this. But it's
I'm gonna message you, man. Both of you guys. Thanks, guys.
All right. Yeah, kind of. And John, on that note, kind of what Nick was talking about, did you, obviously it sounds like you had a special relationship that you built and you kind of, nurtured throughout the process. Do you kind of have an ethos or an idea of kind of that dynamic with the seller, whether you kind of want to be more friendly and then kind of have your deal team maybe be more of the pit bull when you need it? Or I don't know if you guys could speak to kind of having that dynamic of, like Nick was talking about, trying to get things moving along, or if you're, frustrated with some element of the process, kind of the different levers that you can pull with your deal team.
Yeah, I mean, great question, Charlie. To Larry's point about professional service providers, one amazing aspect of having a legal team that is very familiar with the M&A process is they are not afraid to be bulldogs. And, in some instances, really just blew away, the seller's lawyer with their professionalism and with their knowledge and their ability to just like immediately react. So, there definitely can be an element of, hey, I really trust my attorneys. They've gone through this bunch of time. They're just going to talk directly to your attorney, and they can kind of speak like professional to professional. And that does take a lot of the stress off you. So, I certainly don't want to place it like good cop, bad cop. And obviously, like everyone on your team, at the end of the day, you're responsible for their actions. But, for example, having a CPA talk to a CPA, they can have usually like much different personalities and much different kind of directness and conversation, where you and the seller can just kind of like sit to the side and be like, all right, well, they've hashed that out, like let's move on. So it is a huge tool to have many people on your team and able to kind of like push for your ultimate objective, but not have it come to you. So I mean, it is nice to kind of have a level of separation. I mean, similar to being in the military, where you want your platoon sergeant to handle certain things and your squad leader to handle certain things. It's nice to have a level of escalation in it, so that if your insurance diligence person has a problem and can't hash it out with the other insurance provider, then they can elevate it to you, as opposed to you kind of grinding it out all the time with the the seller. So yeah, it definitely saves a lot of time and energy to have a team who is used to the process and also doesn't get rattled by edits, requests, anything. They're just, yeah, part of the process, no problem, part of the process, seen this 100 times. So to Larry's point about reps, that's really invaluable to hire people who've seen the process before, because a divorce lawyer who all of a sudden jumps into an asset purchase agreement, not going to have that type of perspective, and is going to get really bent out of shape about some random paragraph that they just can't find it in their heart to change, as opposed to somebody who's done this thousands of times and gets what's important and gets what's not, and can just keep the momentum going.
Perfect. All right, and last couple questions here. So we got a question on any advice on retention of key employees who are cashing out some of their equity post-close.
Cashing out some of their equity post-close. So that definitely adds a layer of complication to it. If there's multiple owners, some of which are going to stay and some of which are not. So the equity piece, rolling equity, is now a part of the SBA's program. So that's going to be kind of like a new challenge for people to face, both with the retiring primary owner and key employees. So there's definitely some mitigation through insurance policies, but obviously like that's when things have gone wrong and you've lost somebody that you want to. But as far as retention bonuses and some other mechanisms that Larry knows way better than I do, there are ways to like structure that, and Mike would be glad to like talk about that one-on-one after a call. But what I would maybe start with is, it's going to be tough if someone's an owner and doesn't know about this until the end. It's going to be tough for any employee, whether they're an owner or not, if they don't know about this till the end. So, that could be an area where you push with the seller and the broker, hey, it's really important for me to meet this key personnel. And, a tactic I took, I didn't meet the majority of the team until literally the day of transition. And I basically stopped operations, throughout the day, cycling through one-on-ones with every member of the team. So the team is small enough to do that. That's not the case, of course, for every acquisition, but just like taking over a new platoon, showing up at a new unit. My introductory speech, which searchers think a ton about, and rightfully so, but my introductory speech was literally, hey, I could be the best leader in the world or the worst leader in the world, but what you're about to hear from me is going to sound exactly the same, whether I'm the best or the worst. So all I'm asking is time to trust me and build that trust, and that I can prove who I am, that I say I am. But that key man risk is going to be a huge part of your diligence. And there's going to be a lot of questions around that from the bank as well, and the lender and everybody involved. So yeah, let's definitely chat about that one-on-one, but it's a huge part of this. And people will say that fears of the whole team leaving are overweighted. And I get that perspective for sure, but it didn't make it any easier. The day of meeting the whole team, when I thought there's a chance that everyone might walk out, and then I'm left with no HVAC skills owning an HVAC business. So I get it.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
It's even more critical if there's one or two key people, really key people in driving the company, and the owner won't let you meet them. To me, that's a diligence thing. That's a red flag. There's something there that he's afraid you're going to find out. You can't judge the personality of the person that's going to be working for you in a key position who controls other people. So, I mean, the diligence process should be one where you're really taking stock of personalities and getting to know and try to build relationships with people. And if you're being shielded from them, there's probably a reason for that. And it's not necessarily because they're afraid they're going to find out the business, they're going to sell the business. At some age, the people know they're going to sell the business. The business may transition overnight. So it's not like we're playing secret here. We got a deal going on. So I think I'd press hard. If I can't talk to key personnel, I can't make the deal.
Great. Okay, and then kind of final question. I know we're a little past time. Sorry about that, guys. But just kind of what did you rely on during due diligence to make sure you had the buyer business fit that you were looking for? And then the last question is, what do you recommend to mitigate sunk costs while you're under LOI? Kind of, I guess, question on, that due diligence process and how to think about it, and then also how to not go too far and waste too much money, on that first LOI that you get under.
Yeah, the mitigate sunk cost is a real concern, especially for self-funded searchers. And I myself was very wary of that. So, in the selection process of professional service providers, obviously there's the opportunity cost of your own time, but when you're assembling your team for due diligence, that can be part of your initial conversations as you're selecting lawyer, quality of earnings team. What happens if there's a broken deal? Can we roll some of the payment into the next deal? Because I'm definitely going to close at some point. It might not be this one. Is there fixed fee structure? Because that can be incredibly useful, because you're not going to be thinking about a lawyer tapping a clock every 10 minutes, if it's not fixed fee. And those can add up very quickly, especially for a lawyer that is not experienced in M&A, is going to need time to think and make edits and bring in associates and everything else. So, if you hire a attorney that's extremely experienced in this and they have a fixed fee, that's kind of like the golden standard there. The quality of earnings, you can do a quality of earnings light versus quality earnings kind of full package. So, going back to like, you need to be comfortable with your own budget, and then understanding that you're probably not going to get down to every detail, but what do you absolutely need to know? What do you need to know that would make you say no to the deal? Having that type of clarity is difficult going into this, especially if you're like, I can't wait to close on this business. This is the perfect business. But having advisors or investors who can help you through the process, just calling people who have closed on a similar deal, especially veterans, they'll help you identify, hey, this revenue mix is way out of whack, or whatever that kind of red flag that is just insurmountable is, so that you can tailor the diligence to that. So yeah, it's also like part of the risk of self-funded search for the reward of increased ownership, as the result comes in. And to answer the question on buyer business fit, I didn't have a specific industry thesis going into self-funded search. I, of course, had the criteria that almost everyone has about, low customer concentration, low CapEx, recurring revenue, all that. I really liked HVAC and home services generally because it really has a lot of similarities to the Marine Corps infantry. So, you have a headquarters, you launch talented individuals to the objective, they perform actions on the objective, they come back to headquarters, they train, do maintenance, and get resupplied. So, the idea that, the infantry was directly transferable from that operational perspective, um, was, very powerful in convincing me that this is an industry I wanted to get into. And also just a ton of conversations with other veterans who got into HVAC home services or just trade home services generally. Um, and so without kind of experiencing the day to day and shadowing the owner to truly understand it, through kind of like interviews and, doing as much research as I can, which is a great aspect of searching for a business right now where there's so much information. You can actually get into analysis paralysis and be overloaded with checklists and podcasts and books and everything else. So we're actually in a an overload mode of information, which is great because Charlie and some other groups have created some consolidated lists of great information out there, so you don't have to scour through what might not be the best. But it was nice where it's like a well-trodden path to for veterans to trades home services, where it'd be more difficult to assess if it was kind of a niche business that wasn't common for searchers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. That was and Larry. That was just terrific content, and super grateful for your time. I know you both are very busy, and I'm excited, and I know everyone else here is to continue to watch Change of Command grow and all the things you have going on. It's just terrific. So thank you so much. And if you have any closing remarks, I'll hand it off to you.
No, thank you again for having me and Larry, Charlie, and like I said, we're easy to find. This is an amazing opportunity for veterans, especially, to go forward, and it's important for our country as well and the communities that these businesses reside. So I couldn't be more thrilled to see what you're building and the group of people that are pursuing this actively. And we're easy to find. So as far as that apprenticeship model goes out, definitely reach out to me or Larry, and we'd love to help. And there's a lot of other vets who are very invested in helping veterans follow in their footsteps. So please rely on the community, and I'm excited for all of you. So thanks again, Charlie.
Yes, John.